I'm still not entirely sure what I just read. It's been interesting. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about the first two books in Amber, which are Nine Princes in Amber and Guns of Avalon. This is a bind-up actually of all 10. They're fairly short novels. And we're doing the first two because after reading the first one, I was interested, but I was still just like not really sure. I felt like I didn't have a good feel of what this series was going to be. So I immediately decided to read the second book as well, just to get kind of a more of a feel of it. And I feel like I did. And I kind of see more what we're doing, what we're going for here, which I wanted to do before doing a review, because the review of the first book would have just been like, this was kind of weird, I don't know how I feel, but it's interesting, and I wanted to have something a little bit more substance to talk about here. So this will be spoiler-free for the actual specific details here, but we're going to talk a little bit about what Amber, what this series is, what kind of the basis is, and a little bit about how the books are handled, because it's an interesting time. And so the whole idea of Amber, which I'm not considering this a spoiler because this is like the idea, but you don't find out immediately in the first book. Like you do, I guess, pretty quickly. But so we have Amber, which is like the one true world, and all other worlds are like shadows of Amber. So that's where it already has kind of a sci-fantasy feel, more so than just fantasy, because there's even like an offhand comment, like you could consider the shadows, like you parallel dimensions or other, universes, like things like that. Whatever you want to call them, whether it's magic, science, but they're shadows of the real true world of Amber. And there are these princes who are able essentially to travel between the worlds and also have impacts on them. And we have our character that in the first book wakes up in a fairly normal world for at least for the 70s, because the first book was published in 1970, and he has amnesia and has no memory of who he is or what's going on, but slowly is figuring out everything and kind of trying to fill in the gaps. And then we see pretty quickly as well traveling to Amber, which you can do basically by changing the world around you to get closer and closer as you go until you finally reach there. But there's also, we learn a lot of contention on who should be the next crowned king of Amber and who's going to be taking over, essentially. And so that's kind of a big thing that is set up. The first book moves very quickly and feels a little disjointed at times, I think, because of the style and just because, you don't quite really know what's going on yet. So for such a short book, that's where I wasn't entirely sure what was going to be happening. There were definitely some things that happened. You sort of get explanations as you go as well, and something I will note is this is first person, and considering you're starting with a character that doesn't really have a lot of understanding because of their amnesia, that's kind of used as a device for you to kind of figure out as you go along. But even the further you get, sometimes the character knows things and just chooses not to explain them to you, or they'll explain them to you when they feel like explaining them to you as well. So it has kind of this you're not entirely sure what's going on type of thing, especially in the first book. But you kind of are figuring it out as you go. And because they're, like I said, they're quite short, things are moving pretty quickly. We're not spending a lot of time just like, we're not going to stop and like info dump like, oh, this is the history of the world. We're just kind of going as we go along. There are a lot of interesting and mixed elements because of the premise here that has, like I said, a lot of both sci-fi and fantasy feel. And this is, like I said, the first book was published in 1970, and it has very much that like 50s to 70s kind of wild sci-fi kind of feel to it, I feel like, as well, because I haven't read a ton from there, but it just has a certain feeling with what I've read so far, with either a lot of the fantasy or the sci-fi, where it's just kind of it's just wild. Like there's a lot going on. There were a lot of really like bold ideas, and so it's very much not following existing formula or anything like that at all. It's just kind of doing its own thing. It's very unique, and I think an interesting read. And like I said, I still wasn't fully sure how to feel about it, so I wanted to try book 2. And book 2 does focus a little bit more, has more of a plot that's easier to follow, and also is starting to set up what's going to be the plot of the series in general. So I feel like after book 2, I'm like, okay, we're kind of getting somewhere. So this is something I would say, if you read the first book as long as you don't hate it, if you're just like, I don't really know how I feel about this, try the second one, because the second one I feel like gives you a better idea of what we're going to be doing with this. We're setting things up, but still, there are a lot of shocking things that happen here. There are a lot of things that don't happen the way that you would expect them to at all, and so it was really interesting, because there are certain things that seem like they're going to be a bigger thing for a long time aren't, and certain things are brought up and become a big thing, and there are a lot of twists and turns with these different characters and things going on as well. And so it is a really interesting world, or set of worlds, and the rules and the way things work are fascinating, and I feel like I've just scratched the surface of what is going on here with this world. So this is one I definitely will be continuing. I'll probably start throwing them in here or there, because like I said, they're pretty short overall. This is like, I mean, this book altogether is, I mean, almost, it's like 1250 about pages. So it's pretty long. But when you think about the fact that it's 10 books, that's like 125 pages on average. So they're pretty short. And you're like, granted, the print's not the biggest, but anyway, they're pretty short, so I think this is something that will continue over time. But I also don't, I fully expect it to completely flip things on its head, things that I thought I know as going along as well. But it's, I don't know, there's something, this frenetic energy to the books that I find really interesting. The other thing that is just super unique here, and I feel like might be a little hit or miss for people, but I found it interesting, was when you're traveling between shadows, essentially, there's a very specific way that it's described. And let me see if I can find an example. I should have done this before, because it's very interesting, the way that it's described, and the way the wording is, and sometimes it's done for multiple pages too. It's not like it's just a really short thing as well. So hold on, let me find a piece here. Okay, so I'm gonna skip around. This is over a couple of pages, and I'm gonna read just a couple parts, because it almost feels like some form of like offbeat poetry. But we have, now a rippling glassy curtain to my right as the rain advances, blue fracture lines within the clouds, the temperature plummeting, our pace steady, the world a monochromatic backdrop now. And I'm just gonna flip over to another page. The ground momentarily buckling and swaying, as if mountains were shifting their feet. To every star its double, a halo round the dumbbell moon, the plain, the air above it filled with fleeting shapes. And here we'll go another one here. Flashing between walls of stone, dislodged pebbles vanishing in the now racing current, their splashes drowned in the roar's echoes, deeper the defile widening, down, down, farther still. So it's kind of just odd, like, descriptions. It does feel almost like it's some form of poetry, like you said, but you get a lot of those, which are just interesting. It's kind of a weird thing, and it's just all gives this, I feel like it's a very unique style and flair that has me really interested for this one. So I don't know that this is going to be something like I just absolutely love as a series, but I'm very interested, and I'm pulled in, and it's definitely something that I will be continuing and reading the rest of this, and I'm curious just to see where it goes, because like I said, there are so many elements, even in the first two books, and them being shorter, there's a lot that is done that's really just interesting and surprising and just unique. So I'm really curious to see where this goes. Now, I have heard that since the way these were published, it wasn't something that you necessarily were expected to be reading in order. It sounds like this was kind of like you could pick up any one of them at any point and probably read it and be fine. So at least in book 2, there was a little bit more than I would like, reminders of what happened in the first book. Just because they're so short, we did spend a little bit more time than I would have liked confirming things that happened. But also, it wasn't like egregious or anything like that, so it wasn't a huge turn off. But I'm interested to see. I hope it's not constant in the book, since I will be reading these in order. But sometimes you just get that with things that had a different expectation of publishing than there. But so there's been enough interesting things. The elements that we're exploring, just kind of the premise, like I said, the idea of going between these different worlds, and the big battles, the fight for supremacy over Amber, as well as lots of other things, and things that have just been started to be teased, like the Courts of Chaos, which I don't know what are yet, but have been mentioned here or there. So there's a lot more to come, and I'm definitely interested here. I would be really interested to hear thoughts, anyone who has read either the first two, the ones that I have, or the series as a whole, what you think, if any of the things I'm talking resonate, or if you think like there will be things that I'll change my mind on later. Just I'd be really interested on more experiences of people who have read this, because it's been really unique and interesting so far. So curious to chat more on that. So definitely let me know in the comments. Otherwise, though, that is it for this one. So make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description, as always, for the Wizard of the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything. It's a lot of fun, and we would love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.